let's head over to something entirely different, the topic of salmon, and not salmon that is produced in in labs as a cell ag. So, Yoram Bayani, do I have you with me here, Pure Salmon? I look at the tech team. They give me a thumbs up, which means that Yoram is coming online in a second. So Yoram is calling in. I'm not sure actually where from Yoram is calling in, if it's Singapore or if it's Israel or if it's New York or somewhere else in the world. Is it true?
Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi. Well, actually, sorry.
Abu
Right now I'm in
Dhabi.
Dubai for
Okay,
an
very
hour.
cool. Okay, Abu Dhabi.
I'm in Dubai.
Very good then.
How are you, Jan?
Which is one of your markets. Yoram, it's a pleasure to have you here. I think
My pleasure.
If I had any Norwegians in the audience, they probably would run over to the tech team and try to pull out all the cords so we couldn't hear your story, because your story is the next, so to say, next chapter in the annals of salmon. Can you tell me a bit more of what is Pure Salmon?
Sure, with pleasure. So look, it's actually not true what you're saying, because one of our company, which is the technology part of the business, Pure Salmon Kalnes, is a Norwegian company that we acquired from Veolia, and they're based in Norway.
They will be called traitors in Norway soon.
Yeah, so our mission is not to entirely disrupt somehow the industry and annihilate the Norwegian producers. Not at all. It is one of participating or helping the transition, not only for ourselves, it's not a transition for us, we go directly there, but for the existing producers, so with the entire industry, help them move towards a more sustainable method of production, right? So Pure Salmon is basically, if you have to summarize it, we are essentially solving the two big challenges of the salmon industry. So I think what people have to know is that salmon is an amazing business, first of all. The salmon producers are all listed companies in Oslo, and over the past 15 years, they've outperformed the tech sector. That's how good of a business it is. But if you ever need an illustration of why sustainability matters, they're also the poster child of this, because it's a business where demand is exploding. It's been growing consistently fast. Supply is just there's a lack of supply, and it's now at negative growth. And despite all that, it's an industry that is thriving and that is posting huge profit margin. But they are capped in their growth because of issues that are all related to sustainability. And these issues are a supply chain issue, because you can only produce salmon, next to the North Pole or to the South Pole. You need cold, salted water, which means that if you buy salmon in the US, which is the largest market in the world, or in Japan, or far from Norway or from Chile, it's a highly unsustainable supply chain. It has, and complex in the post-COVID deglobalized world. It's definitely not what you want, but it's, salmon takes the plane, it flies to a processing country first, where it's being deboned and filleted and conditioned, and then it takes the plane again and flies back to, the US or wherever the end market is. So that's a problem. And the second problem, as I'm sure many of you are aware in that region of the world, is the issues that relate to producing in a cage. So you need cold salted water, so you need cages in the sea. And that exposes you to a number of issues: algae bloom, escapes when the net break, but most importantly, disease such as sea lice. And the only solutions to fight this disease are heavy use of antibiotics, of pesticides, of vaccine. And you add to these the hormones, because since with climate change, water temperature are not stable anymore, the salmon stop growing, or they don't grow consistently. So there you go with hormones, right? So what we do is we change all of that, and we bring production on land. No impact on the sea. We just don't touch the ocean, and we produce in a complete, closed, biosecured environment, where because we control every parameter, We use no antibiotics, no pesticides, no vaccine, no hormones. And because we're not in the sea, we also have no plastic pollution and no mercury pollution. So we have a fish that's almost cleaner than you could argue wild fish. And since you can do that on land in a closed, contained, biosecure environment, you can also do it anywhere in the world. So you also, solve that supply chain issue. So instead of having to fly the fish across the world, you're now producing, made in America salmon for the American market, made in Japan salmon for the Japanese market, which has a huge value, by the way. When you're a Japanese consumer or an American consumer, it drives a big premium in price. And you're delivering something that is fresher, 1 week fresher. That means also less waste because distributors have 1 more week to sell it. It's delivered on the day of harvest. That has a much lower carbon footprint because you don't have all this air freight across the globe, which, by the way, you capture as additional margin. So that's also the beauty from an economic standpoint. That is locally sourced, which is what consumer want. That is fully clean, healthy, traceable, and sustainable.
So
Right?
Yoram, this is I think this is a wonderful illustration to what bringing a lot of technologies together can actually achieve. But you also did another thing before starting all of this production, and that was a financial masterpiece, I'd say, because you actually raised huge amounts of money in Singapore in order to do that. Could you tell us a bit about that process?
Sure. So not from Singapore, not in Singapore, but from Singapore.
From
So look, I mean, we have a very unique structure. The problem with impact is very often you need to get your project off the ground, and usually people do seed or Series A round for that. And on new technologies or completely unexplored avenues, sometimes that's challenging. And then, as Elon Musk would say, anyone can do a proof of concept. The problem is scale up production. If you want to have an impact, no one cares if you have a small facility somewhere that works, right? You need to do it at scale and for volume. And so you often need new ways of financing. And that's true when you raise equity. That's true when you raise debt, right? I mean, banks, people would first did solar and wind 25 years ago. It was very difficult to do project financing because it was the first time. Now it's a commodity, so any banks would do it. But it's the same for any new technology. So what we did for us is, look, we have a global vision. We had a global plan. We wanted to reach scale as quickly as possible, and we could not afford to raise a seed or a Series A. It just wouldn't do it for us. We needed a huge amount of capital quickly from the get-go. And so we created a private equity fund called 8F. I'm actually not on the Pure Salmon side. I'm a partner at 8F. And instead of, so we created the Pure Salmon business from scratch. We're still entrepreneurs, but instead of doing a Series A or seed round, we went straight into launching private equity funds that enable us to tap a new pool of investors, all the big institutional investors and so on. And so the result is that our first raise was $360 million, which even, impossible meat or Beyond Meat or Impossible Food did not have such a big, seed or Series A. I mean, it just doesn't qualify for a seed than a Series B, right?
It gets
whether
hard
you
to
look at
mention
it
to number that. If you say that's actually your seed round, even I'm like that was the first
that
type
is
of
our seed round. Yeah, that is our seed round. And beyond the amount, look, we're happy with the amount, but beyond the amount, what matters is the type of investors who are backing us, because we have 4 sovereign funds. So, some of the biggest, most sophisticated investors in the world, which are patient capital, long-term capital, and have very deep pockets. So they're here to finance your growth. We have corporate investors, we have institutionals such as pension fund, insurance companies. So that completely changes the game in terms of your scale up, because you have the backing from the get-go to scale up that vision quickly. And for us, we really needed this. It's a business that is amazing, very profitable, but it only works at scale. It doesn't work when you build small facilities. So that was the premise.
I think it's absolutely wonderful to hear about how you put not just technologies together, but also financing together in a very smooth and nice package. So tell me, where in the world are you now building your facilities?
So we're building. Yeah, I can't share. I was going to share a slide, but we're essentially building four large-scale facilities at the moment. One in the U.S. in Virginia, one in France next to Bordeaux for the European market, and one in Japan for the Japanese market. And then we are building one in Southeast Asia as well for the Southeast Asian market. This is our initial project, and then we have follow-up projects coming soon in the Middle East as well as in China.
This is amazing. So suddenly, farming of salmon is another type of industry than it used to be. It used to be more like a glorified smallholder that has, built up their farm to some sort of a standard, and it's of course built vast riches in Norway. And suddenly, this is a new take on how to farm salmon. And where do you think this will end? Do you think that salmon farming eventually will move over to your model, or will it still be cages in the sea?
Yeah, look, that is already happening, right? So if I can take an analogy, Pure Salmon Calnes, the technology provider that we use, which we now own as well, is building this type of land-based facilities for cage farmers. So let me explain. They're struggling so much with the issues they have that they have no other solution today but to delay the time at which they put the fish in the sea. So they're because the minute they put the fish in the sea, they have to fight all these problems. So they're raising now juveniles on land, what we call smolt, small fishes. And once they have these small fishes, it's when they're the most fragile and prone to disease and mortality. So they're raising them on land and then they're moving them to the cages. And so they need us to build these facilities for them. That's why I'm saying we're participating to the transition of the entire industry, not just building our own producing farms.
Hmm. So salmon will become, then of course it means that when you grow salmon in Japan, it's Japanese salmon, right? And
It
it's
is. It is.
Virginia
So it's a
salmon, right?
product that doesn't exist in the market today.
It is, right?
Uh,
And people are willing to pay more for that locally sourced salmon, right?
so they are. Look, they're so much so that we're signing offtake agreements with retailers, with distributors. We've done it for every market years in advance. So we sold the entire Japanese production 2.5 years before we even started the construction of the Japanese facility.
Hmm.
And this is because Japanese salmon is just a product that doesn't exist. So the perspective for Japanese retailers, and in particular the high end of the market, to have a made in Japan salmon for Japanese consumer is extremely attractive. And then we're doing it for volume, and we're also doing it at a price premium, which we don't need. It's very important compared to lab-grown meat or to plant-based alternative where you need a certain scale up and you need to reduce the production cost so that at some point you're competitive with the product you're trying to replace. For us, we are inserting ourselves in existing shelves in retails. We're just another type of, we're just another salmon producer. The difference is we're a lot more clean, we're a lot more sustainable. We're just doing things better, but we're not trying to create a new market. And it doesn't cost us more to produce than it does the rest of the market. So it's very different from when you try to sell a Beyond Meat burger, where it costs $25, but the benchmark is $1 with bad quality meat.
Okay, so here in Sweden, will we also get one of these facilities, or will we start importing salmon from France in the future?
Well, I mean, look, there are actually small competitor projects who are trying to do the same in Sweden. And we wish them luck. Eventually, we will build more facilities in Europe because Europe is obviously a huge market for salmon. I mean, look, you have to know the premise of our investment thesis is that salmon is the new chicken. So, and that's the case everywhere, right? Within traditional protein, I'm not talking about alternative protein. So the market is big. It continues to grow even in Europe. And we will be building more facilities in Europe, and there will be others that will try to build these facilities as well.
Thank you so much, Joram. You're kickstarting a new industry, and I think the audience here will be really interested in following what's happening with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Always pleasure. I'm available. You have my contact if anyone wants
I
to
will
get
now
in touch.
forward it to people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Johan.
A big round of applause for this, for pure salmon. Now, I'd also say